Welcome back to another edition of In the Hot Seat here on the Podium Finish and the Podium Finish Live. I'm Rob Tiongson, and on this edition of In the Hot Seat, our first of 2024, I am so excited to have a really iconic race car driver to kick off the new year. He's the 2010 Daytona 500 champion, and oh, by the way, he also won the 2010 Brickyard 400, which is back this year. So who better to bring in 2024 than with Fox NASCAR commentator and analyst, Jamie McMurray. Jamie, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I hope you and your family had a great holiday season. And just to kick things off, I know that the Fox NASCAR season's just about to kick off, and you've been an analyst since 2019. So just to kick things off, I'm curious, what's it been like to be in this full-time capacity with them for the last 5 years and serve as an occasional host for Race Hub?
Yeah, it's been a great journey. I've learned, I mean, what if I could go back and I would tell all drivers this, if you could do TV first and then go drive the car, you would understand things so much better. A lot of what TV asks you to do doesn't always make sense, during the year or when you're driving, but now being on the TV side, knowing what they're trying to get or why they are doing the ask that they are, it makes complete sense. So it's been fun to see the other side and just kind of learn TV. It's been I didn't think of I never really thought about when I went to do TV that it would be a second career, but that's what it's turned into, and I really enjoy it.
And a lot of fans seem to love your works as well because when you've been in the booth a few times and when you've hosted Race Hub a few times, social media seems to love what you do because bring a lot of relevance from what you've done in the racetrack to your personality on the camera. I mean, is it kind of a natural fit where you're just like, all right, Jamie, I'm just going to be myself in front of these folks?
Yeah, I don't know that people when I raced, and my wife used to tell me this, and I never knew that this happened, but she would talk about on race weekends or race morning how you would turn into a different person. And I would lose any sense of humor that I had because I was just, I was so focused on the racing. And I think some guys do a better job of balancing that. I did not. I was just all in, and that's kind of how my life is. So I don't know that people ever got to I don't think people ever, like especially fans ever knew that I had a sense of humor or that I like to joke around. And TV's allowed me to kind of open up to some of that, and whether it's just, doing Race Hub, I've learned that, I thought doing TV that you went on, it was going to be like super structured, super just serious, and I've just learned so much that it's about having fun and laughing, and if like being witty is so valuable because when something happens live on TV, there's nothing funnier than those bloopers or those moments that aren't scripted, that just happen naturally.
That sounds like to me that you had a good crash course on all of this, maybe even 20 years beforehand, because one of your first teammates was Sterling Marlin, and it's no secret that he was kind of a comedian himself. So do you think he kind of rubbed off on you 20 years later?
I don't know about that. Sterling's humor was a little different than what mine was. But he was a fun teammate. I really enjoyed getting to have him as a teammate.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, Jamie, that Sterling was quite the influence on you, but you've always had a great personality, in my opinion. And it's been showing, especially even after your last start in the Daytona 500 back in 2021. So I'm just curious, what's it like to share those experiences when you were a race car driver, especially driving the Gen 6 car, which is the last one since the next gen, and then bring it home to the audiences so that they can, number one, understand what you're saying and believe you, and number two, that it comes from an authentic voice and tone.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you think about sharing experiences, I don't try to get too technical with like the car stuff because I think that's kind of easy to explain. You can show, graphics of rules changes or cars, but the emotions that a driver feels, I do know what those are. And I think every driver handles that differently. Anyone who watched any of my victory interviews, I typically cried because it meant so much to me and it was emotional because of how hard I'd worked to get there. And so I enjoy being able to just share, what I feel like a driver's thinking, whether it's in a win, or if it's, coming to the last restart, and your heart beating out of your chest, knowing what's on the line. I enjoy being able to try to share with people and explain, what the drivers are feeling in that exact moment.
And I think it shows because I think that's where like folks love AJ Allmendinger, for instance, and they loved you back then. I mean, the picture in my background that people can see in the video interview, I mean, you showed so much emotion in 2010. And let me ask you very briefly about 2010. When you won those races at Daytona, Indianapolis, and Charlotte, was it kind of like one of those, don't pinch me because if I do, this might be a dream kind of a year for you?
Yeah, the Daytona 500 was really special because, just 4 or 5 months before that, I didn't even know if I would be racing anymore. I'd been in the Cup Series at that point 6 years, and I'm like, maybe this is it. The economy had kind of flipped upside down the few years prior to that. Sponsorships were harder than ever to find. There weren't as many teams, and I was so fortunate that, Ganassi, who I'd driven for before, had an opening with Truex leaving, and we worked really hard to make that all work out with Bass Pro Shops initially, and then bringing McDonald's on board. But to go from not knowing if you're going to be employed to then winning the, biggest race in NASCAR, it was pretty unbelievable. And then that whole season, we should have won the Coke 600. I finished second in that race. The Southern 500 that year, I finished second in, and then to be able to win Indy, ran second at Talladega. Like, it was pretty unbelievable season. And on top of all that, that's the year that my wife Christy and we had our first child. So Carter was born. It's a pretty awesome year.
I love that. And that's probably the best part of 2010, not just the wins, your son's birth that year. And we got to even see a little bit of what Carter does these days because earlier in 2023, they showed a great documentary of you, your father, and your son at the go-kart track. I think in Mooresville. And I thought it was such a touching documentary because it was clear that you're sharing your bond of racing with your father, but also you're getting to be your dad, to be a dad to Carter. I mean, what was it like to show this vulnerable personal side to your life and showing what Carter does, continuing your family's legacy in racing?
Yeah, it's been the journey with Carter has been really fun, and it's one of the more frustrating things that I've ever done. It's also like the most satisfying. But when we first started karting, I've used that as a life lesson, and showing him that if you want to be successful at anything, it doesn't matter if it's just racing. It could be your schoolwork. If you want to do well, you have to work hard at it. Like, it doesn't come easy. And that's why, I mean, that's part of the reason that I would get emotional when I would win, because I knew how hard I'd work to get there. And then when that work pays off, it's super satisfying. But that journey with Carter has been fun. We're gonna move up and do some Legends car races this year. So he's kind of transitioning, which is a little scary because it's your kid and you're putting him in these faster cars. But it's also really fun to kind of watch him grow as a driver. And he has the same passion that I did when I was his age. So I hope it works out for him. It's a hard journey.
I'm sure. And I bet your dad felt the same way too when you were the one driving in karts and obviously in stock cars. He probably had to be as nervous as you are for Carter. And have folks told you how much Carter looks a lot like you when you were that age? Like how the resemblance is there?
Honestly, with our kids, when we go out, typically people say that Carter looks like my wife and that my little girl Hazel looks more like me. So it's so funny because Carter has like such a different. He's so quiet. I feel like compared to me, which is a lot more like Christy.
I like that. And I think it's such a cute family dynamic that you guys have. When I watch it, my family are watching it. My mom's like, I hope Carter makes it. And I was just like, too, he's such a good kid. And I just love how you're so nurturing to him and coaching him too about how to work hard, which it shows in your career. And that's one of the things that makes you such a very liked driver and personality these days. And let's go tap into that analyst mind of yours because 2024, the season's kicking off with a clash and of course Fox's portion of the season. I've got to ask, who are some drivers we have to keep our eyes on at the beginning of this year?
Well, every year, whoever ends strong seems like they start the following season strong. I mean, Blaney's going to be the favorite for the Daytona 500, no doubt. Being able to win the championship, the fact that he won, the last super speed race we were at Talladega. So I'm going to say he's probably going to be the favorite at the beginning of the year. As well as I think Brad and Busher from RFK. It's been pretty impressive to see the growth of those teams, but everyone's going to have a little different like nose this year, and that doesn't sound like that big of a change, but it is a big change to the car, and we'll just have to wait till we get through the first two basically super speedway type races, and then get to some intermediate tracks or some short tracks to see with the rules changes with the different tires who's been able to capitalize the most on that. But I think starting the year out, you just have to look at those guys that made the championship four. So Blaney, Larson, Byron, and see, to me, they'll start out the season the strongest.
That's quite true. I think with the championship four favorites from last year can certainly carry their momentum from 2023 into this year in 2024. So that should be fun to say the least. And just a hypothetical question, if you had to start off now driving these cars, do you think you would find them a lot harder than what you were driving in the Truck Series and eventually up to Xfinity and Cup?
I don't think harder is the right word. The competition's closer than ever. When you sit back and if you watch lap times during the race, it's pretty incredible how the leader and 20th place are running almost the same lap times. However, you tend to find the same guys working themselves to the front, whether it's through the pit sequence or restarts. The same guys tend to find their way to the front. So I don't know that this car is harder. It's a little bit of a different animal. That I was shocked when they went to this low profile tire. You didn't hear a lot of guys talk about that. And when I would go and drive sports cars that had, a similar tire on, I found that the feel of the car and how much you can yaw it out was so much different than what we were used to with, the old style tire with the trucks and Xfinity cars run now. I didn't hear a lot of guys talk about that. I thought that was going to be a harder transition for the guys. So I don't know. I mean, all that stuff is different. And I went through a lot of those changes throughout my career, especially from like 2013 through 2018. It seemed like we had a different rules package every year. We had mega downforce, then no downforce, and tons of power, then no power. But the best teams, the best drivers still seem to find their way to the front.
Absolutely, that's quite true. And yeah, you were right, quite versatile with the different types of cars that we had. To your point, the Gen 6 car had so many different variations. I don't even know if we had time talking about every package right now, but I always found that interesting to say the least. But one common denominator to be successful in racing is also great physical fitness. And I know towards the end of your Cup career, you placed a lot of emphasis on great physical fitness, like with running and cycling. How much have you embraced doing these to be in your best shape in your life, even to this day?
Yeah, so I still run 10 miles a day, 6 days a week. That's just kind of my normal, like I wake up every day and I go run 10 miles. Like let's have some coffee and I go. And I do it mainly because I don't want to get fat, but I also love running. I love the endorphins that releases. It just makes the rest of my day better. And I like being in shape. I just think that, that's to be healthy in life, I think everyone should do what they can physically, whether it's, eating right or running or lifting weights, whatever motivates you and makes you feel good. I think everyone should do that, just in general. So for me, I don't know that that'll ever change. And I think as you get older, that becomes more important to you, especially if you can find the time to do it. It seems like 40 is when most people make that transition to like more exercise and eating better, because your body gets, well, it gets a little bit weird looking, right? It's not the same body that you had when you were 25. So you become a little more conscious of that. But clearly, like with our kids, we work really hard on you let them make their own decisions, but you just try to make sure they know that right from wrong, and let them make the decision, and you hope they choose the right one.
Certainly. And I love the fact that running is part of your life. And I can relate to that because I'm trying to get into 10 miles a day of running myself. So
Good.
I was sitting here just like, oh my goodness, I wish I could even do like 4 times a week. I just did it last week and I was like, oh my God, I'm spent, but I can relate to what you're saying because yes, 20 years ago we could eat cookies and chicken and get away with it, but today it's like,
Totally.
like we
It's
gotta
different.
gotta
It's
be
different
careful.
for sure. Yeah, for
Oh,
sure. I
oh,
don't I think the key there is that I don't run fast. I just run at what feels good, and I listen to podcasts. It's one of the ways that that I prepare for a race or for a weekend is listening to podcasts, and you listen to all these different driver interviews, and it gives you time to kind of think and process and kind of digest like what questions you might ask somebody if you're doing an interview with them that week.
that's why you're so good at your job. It's what I do too. So
Oh,
that's
perfect.
awesome.
There you go.
If you listen to this during your next run in in 2024, I hope. But no, that's exciting to know that you do that because I also, as a runner, I try to run just for the distance. I don't run for the pace because I am not going to be fast as well. So it's comforting to know that you don't focus on pace too, because a lot of people will always be like, "I'm fast," and I'm like,
I know. I
"I'm
don't care how
far."
fast you are. Yeah.
Exactly. Now I got to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap things up. Obviously you talk a lot about your family, but one of the things I think you've shown a lot of joy with is being able to spend time with your family and your wife, of course. What's it been like to spend more time with them and still get to do what you love in racing so that you have both of those worlds in your life?
It would be really hard to go back and race again and be gone, not just for the races, but for the appearances, for everything else you have to do. Because I mean, everything I do is like at a studio now, so I'm home. I'm home a lot. Like, I mean, I'm home every day, and I get to. I don't know normally take the kids to school. My wife does that, but I get to pick them up from school and take them to the horse barn for my little girl, or if I take my son to a workout class or to the kart track after school. Hey, it's kind of be just I wouldn't even say a normal dad because I think a normal dad would have to work till 5, but I get to I mean it's pretty great to be able to have the life that I have now, but to go back and have to do all the racing and not be home, and I mean just honestly just even leaving for a weekend, it's hard to be away from your kids when you're used to being with them all the time. But when I was driving all the time and we had kids, I didn't know any different. That's just what you did, and you make the most of the life you're given and the opportunities you have, and if you can be home, it's great, and if you can't, then you just figure out how to make it work. But it would be super hard to go back and do that again.
I can imagine, and that's why it's so hard. People think that race car drivers are just like, oh, they have the ideal life, but they're people doing their jobs just like you and I are doing, and you're
Totally.
giving up a lot to do what you want to do. So I think a lot of folks will understand that point for sure. Now, from a last question, and I hope we get to do more interviews in the future, Jamie. This one's going to be a little bit of a fun one for sure. If there are a few songs that you feel best personifies who you are as a person and as a driver and commentator, what songs would they be and why?
Okay, I will not be able to answer this because I'd have to put a lot of thought into that. A song that would just describe your life or your oh boy, I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to ask me another fun one because that's putting me on the spot. I don't know that I don't think I've ever thought of that.
I actually stumped you. And that's not a Jeff Gluck question, it's a Rob Tiongson question.
Okay. That's so good. Yeah, that's a lot
Well,
of pressure. I feel like I could say something wrong there, but I don't gosh, I don't know. I can't even think of anything right off the top of my head that would I love music. It's funny. I've never thought about that for myself. I feel like when I listen to music, I told my little girl the other day there's a song called Lady. It's a country music song. And I told my little girl every time I heard that, it reminded me of her because I feel like typically music does remind us of people or of times in your life, but I don't think I've ever thought about my own.
hmm, we'll have to revisit that sometime later on this year.
Okay.
I love that. That's the first time I've ever stumped someone on this. So
Yeah,
there
well,
you
I could have
go.
probably just thrown you like a random answer out, but I want to think about that. I want to make it right.
Okay. Well, hopefully it doesn't stump you during a show because if I see you pausing and they're asking you a question, I'd be like, uh-oh, that's because of me.
Yeah, well, you never know. You never
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you have anything you want to say to the race fans and those of fans of NASCAR, Fox NASCAR, about 2024?
I would say this, and you said it a couple times during this interview. I tend to read social media and the comments, good or bad, about what people say. And when you race a car, you know success based on finishes, and sometimes you get a bad finish even if you ran well, but for the most part we judge success on results. In TV, it's all someone's perception of you, and it's an opinion, and it's really hard to please everybody. But I have been overwhelmed and just really enjoyed reading the comments of things people, what they say about me when I'm on TV, or if you do an interview. I can't tell you what a blessing it is. I enjoy telling stories. I enjoy talking about racing, and and I'm thrilled that people like listening to those stories because it means a lot to me. So I would just say thank you to all the fans out there that have all these great comments and what they say, because it does mean a lot.
And then I'm sure all the fans that will listen to this interview are gonna love this, and they want more Jamie Mack content on TPF. So I hope we do, because we didn't even get to talk about the 2003 rookie season you did, or anything in your career. And I want to talk about your career because you had a great one for sure. And we're fulfilling one of my dreams I wanted to do when I first started as a journalist. So I hope we get to chat again,
Okay.
Jamie. I had a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on. You had some great questions. I will tell you that from my perspective, doing an interview is significantly harder than being interviewed. It's hard to come up with questions, listen to what their answers are, and then, respond to that. Because what I have found is that a lot of times having 20 questions isn't the right thing. It's about having a couple of good questions and then listening to an answer and following up with that. And I don't know that people can relate to how hard that just is.
It is, but the key thing I say is to have a good conversation and let it flow. And if it does, everything
Totally.
works out, you know?
Yep. Yep. I appreciate you having me on.